Good morning. Welcome to lecture about free art and music, sound art, electroacoustic composition. And I try to do it in English. I'm sorry for that. My English is not so well improved, so I try to improve it. Okay, I start with my readings. It's about 40 minutes, I think. I try to be fast. Thank you. My experience as a student and later teaching assistant for free art and music at Düsseldorf, the Academy or the Cologne University of Media Arts were the first different impressions of the different university or schools. At the Venerable Art Academy you can smell the color, the wood, and you walk through long old corridors to the respective workshops for painting, for example, sculpture, graphics, melting, what was there, just for plastic, different kind of materials you can work. And on the other hand, at the KHM, it means the Kunsthochschule für Medien, on the other hand, computers were already more in the foreground, and the material for art was more, or maybe is in this time, digital than analog. I studied about in the middle of 90s, and so there was another time till now. However, I always drawn to both institutions because the digital artworks to be created also needs an analog basis, just like a computer that consists of various sheets like metal or plastic, some materials. In our case, the function of materiality are defined by the artistic logic. I have and had tried myself in the most different materials like plaster, wood, metal, welding and plastic in order to apply this for the sound. Since I was already long before my art and music study sound artist, I will explain my development below. This means later. Working with different materials for the sound. The sound was and is my thing, and to work and manipulate material with the sound thing could be an experiment. I always like to make sound material experiments and then forget time and space. This state is beautiful and unfortunately not predictable, like something of a compulsory attendance in a dependent paid job. Of course you can also work as well-dependent paid job. Of course you can also work as a very well paid digital service provider for well-known big companies with a daily flat rate and spend your time there. The actual task, usually internet-based public relation work, must then be done in the interest of the client, but the different realities of life, of government administration and freelance artistry always came up against in conflict. So I showed up in these jobs, or at these jobs, in the most impossible clothes, and had spent the night in the car and looked correspondingly incompatible for the 0815 office word. So you quickly get lonely and then do the job in peace. That's just on the edge. The skills in addition to this is also a digital and a musical artistic craft to master protects the freelance artists in professional life from impoverishment. In particular, the highly remunerated game industry is always looking for digital specialists for partial tasks in the development of new games. The turnover of the digital game industry exceeds Hollywood and Co. many times over. However, the study of the fine arts with a focus on digital form is about developing the artistic skills of students. I believe that this class should be defined for fine art because the student should first have the freedom to express themselves in the artistic disciplines of the art academy. The digital forms arise and depend on the experience in the artistic workshops. Each artistic path is individual, and you can only accompany it in order to understand together with the respective students where the journey is going. As already described below, you can do what you want to do around your studies with me. You can ask yourself what excites you the most. Is it, for example, the photography? Then you go after it and later create, for example, some digital animations or etc. Or you love the smell of the oil painting. You paint yourself through thick you paint yourself through thick layers, perhaps to film it up and re-vary them by means of computer color calculations. The concrete artistic problems arise from your work or from the work. You can come together as a class and we discuss it in the colloquium. And the forms of digital art refer to the pictorial expressions of the human being and the digital translation into the dual machine code. This means 0 and 1. The apparent contradiction between an organically improvisity and a structured determinacy of human poetics is evident in the artistic different experience of the machine. The aid of technology in its respective further development serves to classify the initially confusing artistic creation. Because by living into the day, waiting for the right moment, or rather not waiting, the moment creates itself as an intuitive insight, a situation of eruption as an example. The outburst, like urge to create, discharge itself uncontrollably, and it's initially left out for later classification. Drawing, just like improvised instrumental playing or singing at the moment of the internal means endocrine stimulation. You can experience its expression in the moment. The later processing of the analog testimonies by forms of digital technology is designed as post-production and often not even conscious at first. Younger artists in particular may be in the phase of artistic self-discovery and remain stuck in the creation of poor expression. This is certainly not a problem, as it can mean the natural development of the professional artist. First of all, it would be problematic if no inclination of artistic expression were recognizable at all, or could be experienced by yourself or oneself. Usually a quotient mark, the artistry has to express itself like or as a natural need. Well, the computer, as a central component of the post-production and artistic production, makes rational, compositional decisions for the resulting work possible. You can compose the intuitive material in all conceivable variations in the way that comes closest to your own artistic intention. It is precisely in the production of artistic series that the unconscious artistic signature becomes apparent, as the tried and tested techniques are shown there repeatedly. Later on, this can also become a problem, especially when you have developed your artistically to the point where repeatedly prevails. The difficult thing is this process of automated repetition. To stop, you just continue to work and undeterred and simply don't wonder about the unpredictability of the medium of art. In media art, this process seems to be reversed due to the programmed algorithmic structure. Using the example of sound art, this can be seen in the programming of sequences. I can rearrange individual musical phases or phrases in the other words blocks of notes in such a way that they double in value and then they end ostinagetically in nothingness. The arrangement of the variation only becomes complex through the layering of the several blocks of notes to each other, etc. You can block everything and copy it and rearrange like you want to do. The well-known copy and paste process can very simply provide the basis for newly emerging compositional structures, since one can then make changes in the copied materials that makes repetition no longer recognizable, but nevertheless make time management as a continuous material, as an integral part of sound, art or music. Forms of digital art mean that one deals with forms of contemporary art. In contrast to static photography or sculpture or painting, movement is in the foreground. The animation of the individual image to the continuous series counts the time anew. Of course, the time also runs while we are looking at a static picture, but the artistic intervention is left out. That is only through the conscious composition in time, in the time plane, the timeline. The timeline is very important, you know it from the computer work. And you can perhaps have an influence on the passage of time. Time flows down the river like water and flows even when you are not longer there. But of course, time can be influenced by the human actions. The perception of the time is individual and depends on the parameters to be composed. You can express oneself on the level of contemporary art in the way that best corresponds to one's own artistic ego. One becomes an actor, a performer of time, and transform a passive observer into an acting person, or acting person is a better word. You act in the medium time. The form of expression is not tied to be specific as a medium, is not tied to a specific medium as much as it to the watch, since I can construct my works by means of timepieces. This can arise in more or less structure way depending on the artistic personality. Nan Hoover, for example, from Kunstakademie Düsseldorf, already had the finished work in the mind in the course of the early 1980s. Only had to realize it at the editing film table. It was the time of analog working. Namjoon Paik, on the other hand, was influenced by the editing process for his video work and composed a new piece of art while realizing. A little bit to my person, my background. Was born in 1974 in Munich. I lived there, lost my parents as a child, and going to the orphans home, and a little bit hard. But I say something about my musical biography. At the age of 7, I learned piano and guitar, and I sang at the church choir. I was able to do this freely about 3 or 4 years until my living conditions changed so much that this was no longer possible. Later, at the age of 19, I built a small music studio out of keyboards, sound machines, cassette recorders and the first VHS cameras. I started with a mix of rock, pop or punk, collage and copied stuff I heard on the radio. It wasn't until I developed an education that I became more and more interested in the experimental forms of music making. I did covers John Cage, Colin Stockhausen, Namjoon Paik, and the American underground poetry, Rosamund Trockel, and different works here, Joseph Beuys, and all these people influenced my thinking. And yeah, really important, I read the American underground poetry of the 1960s and incorporated this into my ever-growing electroacoustic archive. After several attempts, after several application attempts, I was lucky enough to be accepted at Kunstakademie Düsseldorf, Musikhochschule Köln, Kunsthochschule für Medien. This was in the mid-90s. There I also got to know one or the other protagonist of contemporary art and music personally, or even worked for them. Specifically, my collaboration in the very famous feedback studio around Professor Johannes Fritsch in Cologne, or the computer music gimmick studio also in the same address. It was all in the Ghent Street in the Belgian Viertel in Cologne. This was the gimmick studio around Professor Clarence Barlow, should be mentioned here. This experience in the very close area as an assistant for some times I have had a great influence on my later work. The smell of the 1970s, the years of the new beginnings with its non-conformological contemporary essence have given me and my compositional experimental essence concentrated. In addition to complex circuits for the sound, I also built instruments myself, such as the vuvulectra, a mixture of vuvuzela, you know it from the football World Mastership 2006 or something, I don't know, and some simple sound electrics, or my better well-known work, the violin concerto machine. You can also find this in internet if you write ketonge and you see the Geigenkonzertmaschine, then you find a video for this, maybe some bad video VHS from the 1998 or something, I don't know. There was another time. So where I was, I'm sorry. Okay, this Geigenkonzertmaschine, okay, for example, or one better known work as a violin concert machine which plays violin as a sculpture by means of motor. For this was honorably appointed master student in composition by Johannes Fritsch. My final thesis at the Kunstakademie Düsseldorf was a sound pressure chamber built of wood and 1.5 tons of plaster, in which my electroacoustic music was introduced. This chamber was the resonance room for the specially composed music. The organically undulated structure of the plaster layers was stimulated to dance by very deeply suppressed electroacoustic music. I remember I recorded a lot of oil heatings because you have this sub bass, you know it from organ in a church, and I combined this with some electric or electronic sound in a computer and composed a piece for this sculpture, for this big chamber room. This is called let me see, the sound pressure chamber room. You can find this Schalldruckkammer, ketonge Schalldruckkammer at internet or on my YouTube channel, I don't know. There is, I forget, my beer brain forgets. Okay. The organically undulated structure of the plaster layer was stimulated to dance by very deeply suppressed electroacoustic music, because in all my musical endeavors or experiments I always want to make the mass of musical layers visible, tactile, tangible, or haptical, I could say. The sculpture made of sound can only be seen with the belly as a deep rumble. The abnorm, the bone conductive structure of the human beings sense the weight of music as such without having it concretely in front of its eyes. My experiments are the process that never ended, and the Ketonges archive is expanding organically. I had numerous concerts and exhibitions, the last one at Schloss Museum Moosbroich in Leverkusen, or they call it Meisterkusen. There are also built my next work is named Chemical Sound Machine. In addition to the tube conducting for the sound, it is also about the changeability of the sound and its property to heat or the mixing of sound in various gelatine, starch or plastic mixtures in real time. In order to describe this chemical approximation, approximation of the conversion for example, solid, liquid, gases, and so on. To do this, I use high sound pressure concentrated on a point in the medium air or water. The failed results can be seen in the internet under the video chemical sound machine of the same name. At the same time, I also built a blow-dry accordion combined a pull iron harmonica found in the trash with a hairdryer and electrified this with piezos. But I also composed and playing violin concerts without having learned the instrument. I've never learned a violin, but I want to play a concert as a violin player, and it was really funny. You can find it. Yeah. It's called Geigenkonzert, ketonge-Geigenkonzert, also in the net. I am interested in the things I don't know yet, and actually I still know so far little. That's let me keep going until I drop. My current studio in New Cologne is an old house crammed with electroacoustic toys. And as a big kid, featured cartoon or comic book professor, I'm always researching new variations of circuits and combinations for the individual layers from my archive. In a nutshell, I would like to say that I create a kind of infinitive image material by means of a video feedback loop. You know it when you shoot a camera into a filming monitor and film this image in an infinitum film and varying it in different ways using image layering and simply programmed color filters. I use only the 8-bit color filters from very old school Atari Amiga and so on, some very old personal computers. You can accuse me of making my 100 of videos look more and more similar, but this is probably true, as I have found my technique over time and do it by hand. I'm fascinated by the ever new opportunity to find a work that hasn't there before. As an experimental sound and media artist, in addition to concrete work with sculpture materiality in the form of tubes and small sculptures for sound, I began as a cassette and tape musician in the 1980s, about 1988 or something. I have when I was a kid, I experimented with some small recorder. I don't know. This was just playing, but I'm now playing. I'm just a little big kid. I have continually developed this further and expanded it into include several media. The layering of the individual electroacoustic tracks into complex sound images was always my intuitive and improvisational approach. You can find almost everything I've done artistically so far on the internet under my pseudonym Ketonge. With my low-budget technology from the Electronic Recycling Center, I try to create a subjective sound work that represents me and my not-so-easy life. I think Achtleitner once said a nice saying: "You have no chance, use it." In Düsseldorf, which I was also able to define a lecture, I named this teaching assignment for the fine arts and music, because this has also been my area of tension and artistic expression for about 30 years. In this liberal arts and music class, everyone could express themselves as they saw it. We had painters, sculptors, DJs, video artists, musicians, writers, also doctors and scientists, and humanities as a participant of my course. My course was the wrong expression, as I see the students as often younger colleagues from whom I can learn. In my time, I have communicated with the time-related forms of expression and techniques, and this applies to the younger ones, less proportionality to the technical development, especially in the media arts. Of course, you can still work as a VHS tape video DJ that has a retro museum effect, and maybe you will also discover yourself, or more recently for another media or for other media. Or you can build your set again with an old Revox tape machine to revive that special power plant sound of the Klingklang studio, for example, that Düsseldorfer school about the 1960s, you know, the Kraftwerk things. But today's students in particular should understand that the studying, despite so precisely because of COVID-19, okay, it's over. This reading was about in the time of COVID-19. So I said this, despite it precisely because of COVID-19, is a field of experimentation that is very difficult to maintain in later life, because then the business aspects of the no longer so free lifestyle could be in the foreground. So I would help to set up a free class for performance, or in this for the sound or sound art here, and accompany other students in perhaps finding themselves in the wide variety of artistic expressions. The focus is on the individual artistic development and the usefulness of digital media in the performance sector arise from this. You can get to know each other and present the work to the others. The colloquium takes place in the group or class, and you introduce the new artistic product to each other in order to perhaps discuss them. For me, there are no constraints on style, format, or video or media. Do what you're passionate about. Try different medias. Do what you like. We'll also try to present performances, sound performances, exhibitions, readings in the class, and so on. I think I call it ad libitum. I make a seminar and call it ad libitum. Then you can come with your stuff and we will see what we're doing. So make an ensemble or something like that. Each of us is a beautiful sound that may perhaps to be able to be added to the others. The result can be intuitively correct and perhaps comes closest to our humanity, because the artistic meaning arises from your very personal psychological logic. You live the way you make that makes for you sense, or that makes sense for you. You're passionate about the art, otherwise you wouldn't be here. I knew and I know this artistic fire of representation and look forward to seeing, hearing and feeling from you. I was always on fire in my studies, and my music was on fire, and to be able to present this individual in conversation with professor or in class concerts at the Cologne Musikhochschule, for example, or at the Kunstakademie Rundgang. At the time I was very happy to be able to study at this institution after difficult childhood, and you've due my great talent. I gave myself 13 years to study, a luxury, but I was able to do this, to live out my crazy artistic research life. Of course, there is also the economically uncertain side with various jobs in areas that are not bad for your life experience, but are not necessarily beneficial for your own life as an artist. I grew up in Hasenberg, it's a part of Munich North, in north of Munich, in the 1970s and 80s, and lost my parents as a child and went to various homes and job residential groups, and had similar experience there. It was not so easy. Don't say about this, that's not important here. At 16 I dropped out of school in Bavaria and emigrated to Cologne to get my high school degree, my Abitur there at the fifth education path. I was 21, I think, when I get this. Afterwards I applied to Cologne and Düsseldorf and then studied extensively. Because of my previous life I was diagnosed with several disability. However, I see this circumstance as an advantage in artistic work, as I may have insight into areas of life that someone from a functional parental home with money and security may lack. I was and I am a punk. I'm an electro-punk. I know that what it means to have no money, no apartment, and no home, and don't know where to go. Today there's something different, but I'm still far from being on the safe side. Due to my autism, or the syndrome of autism, I'm somewhat limited socially, but I do not correspond to the stereotypical patterns of portrait of artistic people in the media. I'm more interested in the chaotic, unpredictable structures and incorporate this into my videos and music in order to then find a structure that is not conscious, analog to free painting. The intuitive insight, the intuitive determination was also a topic of my doctoral thesis, which I began in psychology, which can be found online. It consists of around 100 pages and was broken down in the doctoral phases because I am an artist and not a scientist who has to improve this or that thing in order to keep it alive. In psychology, this is done through significant numerical evidence of causality and its proof. That was and is not my goal. I want to continue to the flute in artistic folk and to recognize a faint glow in the improvisational which motivates me, even fires me up to continue working, because also in a few of realizing that one's life is not so long as I thought when I was young. Yeah, I get tired, man. It's not so easy to read all this. Freedom in one's own creating being and carrying out of this actuality completely intuitive, surrendering to one's own intention and purpose, also approaching this subject area conceptually and compositionally can mean that nothing is fixed. Decades of experience in the field of visual art and music initially tries to make its way without a concept, similar to water whose parts seems difficult to predict. This organic comparison to the medium of water in particular illustrates my thinking. I write fluently and wake up in the morning and I think I can write the same way, and then I go and then I do or try to, because in life there is always an excuse not to write, not to compose, not to paint or etc. But precisely by giving into your own, the work can be developed with an inkling. Studying art takes time. You can't necessarily convert that into money or anything like that. Your own ability slowly shows itself as a potential that you should take seriously, no matter how nonsensical this may seem, because your own psychology logic is not clearly structured like a precisely calculated map. Free art and music examines the similarities between these two areas, which from a purely physical point of view appear in different frequencies. The visual world in the range of frequency of light, and the acoustic world in the range of frequency of sound, expressed by numerical values that makes the extent of this frequency range. You can now ask yourself that the way different frequency ranges mean and whether they are related. The expression in each form is the same, just in the different language is called frequency. Especially, I can create electroacoustic tones in the audible range using appropriate effect filters, oscillators, capacitors, and then translate this sequence into the language of light. Doing this one-to-one simply means converting from the sound frequency to the light frequency. Experience shows that it makes little sense, since each range of frequency range has its own appearance. This means that the composed sequence can sound beautiful in the audible range, but the same sequence converted into light frequency can only mean an inconceivable flickering or something. I don't know. It's inconspicuous flickery. Oh, fucking Google Translate. So I'm artist and not a physicist, and decided intuitively which light appearance best suits to the acoustic sequence. The sound color is also a light color, and as an electronic painter I'm free to put this together. Some thinking about the machine code, you know it, binary code can also be 0 or 1 in coding form, from to code 2 equals 10, etc. This means that characters or number systems are translated into binary code in order to make them usable for the computers as machine language. A computer consists of electric or electronic components that were designed in such a way that the natural fuel, electricity or gas, for example, the natural fuel, electricity or current, can be harnessed in a controlled manner. This electron current follows the natural course of physical laws as we know them so far. You can study the basics of electrical engineering to understand how this law works. Everything starts at the atomic level, which is synthesized into chemical elements and components using electrons, protons and ions. The chemical laws determines the materiality defined by the chemical period and its connection to each other. The difference in materiality results from the resulting glitter structure, comparable to the solidification of water into ice, or solidifying, melting or metal, you know it from welding, in their different strengths. The world in our phenomena is the synthesis of these natural law connections or laws. The electric plays an essential role as a kind of driving force for this change, the change of the material, the change of the atomic level, and this chemical period level changing. There are components in the computer that control this current in such a way that it can output the binary codes from a program in real time using memory, resistance and tilt controlled movement. The 0 and 1 stands for power off, power on, and this current of electronic controls a large number of transistors that use this tilting movement to turn power off and on. The information power on and off also creates two states in which everything possibly can be programmed. You know it. For example, light on, light off, volume loud, quiet. Now this 0 and 1 situation is still too poor in isolation to be able to represent the complexity of new computers or newer computers. Computer history shows that adding multiplier transistors also increasing the complexity or complexity, since multiplier layers of 1 and 0 information relates to each other. If the one state in the line 1 is specified as 0, this can also be related to the state in line 5 with state 0, and so on. This increase in performance can be guessed as a micro development of transistor and technology and the increase of them. The determining factors in the area of digital performance could be image control, sound control, spatial control, sensor control, self-learning, AI control, etc. Digitality is just a language or coding for the parameters as a communication for the machine. Perhaps on outlook is the intelligence of the chemical components for the futures. Semiconductors could change their physical chemical properties as required by the necessary logic or R logic. In addition to the 0 and 1 flip-flops, transistors could also experience neutral states in order to learn from them. The AI and artificial intelligence works with a new electrical connection that influence alternating current. A capacitor can perhaps decide for itself how much current it delivers and how much resistance it provides. Maybe one computer components becomes another. The basic chemical components would rearrange themselves inside the component in order to change the electrical conductivity. AI means that the computer is no longer what it was when I turn it on. Predictably narrows. There is a rise of becoming independent, but there is also potential as it were with a coil winding around the iron core in the real time, and in order to charge itself for increasing voltage. The computer does strength training by generating its own windings of electromagnetic coils. This radiation emitted can be live treatments for living creatures. An emergency shutdown button is needed to prevent the computer from becoming independent. Performance, on the other side, is the body-related pictorial art from that focus on the expression actors across all disciplines. The actual experience is on site and using not digital, since was as with musical performance is a human being. Can also compare this. Okay. I really get tired. As I said, my experience of abstract forms of video documentation of my action and their blah 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 blah. Looking ahead, I would say that newer hybrid forms of organic computers could represent a possible future, because in particular the source of errors and the possibility of reconciling opposites as a decision can be possible. Similar to the quantum model, the states are no longer just 0 and 1, can also be both, neither or something that was not calculated to intended. This unpredictable appeals to me. E is not closed as is a system and follows for error, and my experience says that the errors can always be an artistic inspiration. The impossible simultaneity of opposite state can present something that shows itself in uncalculated open self-learning program. As indicates to previous digressions, I have spoken about the approach of integralization. This shown graphically in the form of bars that approximate a coordinate graph. The narrower the bars are, the more accurate the digital images of the graphs are. Visually, this means that the pixel aesthetics of the 1980s developed more and more towards real representation. From my artistic point of view, this is not necessarily. It's not so an advantage, as I'm a computer child of the 1980s and love this representation. The more recent development towards Okay. Shit. So it was not so easy to read off. Okay. Just the last chapter. Wow. I talk nonsense, man. Okay, it's just about my compositional working or composing. At the beginning of my electroacoustic composition work, the focus was of course trying out and combining things without any major inhibitions. I played too many notes and randomly combined them with the respective tones and tried out different styles as described above. I've just came out of my living room studio. There is all sort of electroacoustic instruments such as synthesizers, analog or digital, sequencers, effect modulators and computers. Next to a piano, a drum kit, several guitars, violins and self-made instrument. As the time increases in the medium of electroacoustic sound art, I noticed that I work more and more reductively, and I ask myself whether this or that note is actually necessary, and develops an inner logic in connection with other tones. This is reflected in the fixation of the parameters. At the beginning of my microwave music or microwave sound series, I decided that the quarter should be 100 per minute. I always set the beat at 5/4, and the maximum time of the length of the bars or cycles around 500 cycles or bars. In converted time or in converted form, this corresponds to approximately 20 minutes about this time. The essential movement is the metronome, which divides time 5/4. When composing, I decide in real time how long the note values should be within the bars. I build the tones from sine waves and then edit them according to my taste and the aesthetics of the 1980s and 90s, electrical engineering and acoustic. The timbre or the sound color created in sound design are transposed either very high or very low to make the overtones shine. The maximum number of the simultaneous tones is 16, and the simultaneous sounds, I should say, because there are more than one tone. It's a composed sound, and resulting from the program code of the sequencer and its very old school MIDI processing. Work with diskettes and MIDI Atari system and normal old sequencer programming. You know the series, you can say it in numbers: 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 2048, 4096, 8192, and so on. Even after more than 30 years in the field of sound art, it is still fascinating to me how the tones relates to another. You start with a tone and compose in real time over 400 bars and are very contrasted. And do this in a very concentrated way. Distraction of all kinds, especially acoustic ones, are very annoying for me, and I can only work best in peace early in the morning. I can only manage a maximum of maybe 2 or 3 voices in one day over this 400 bars. I could do, but the voices should be highly concentrated. It's fascinating to add the second and the third voice, etc. to it. This also explains my penchant for reduction, as a complexity multiplies with each voice and superfluous notes would be a mistake. In most cases, the internal logic of the composition of the individual voice results from each other. There are simple things that determine the process, such as pauses or ostentatious phrases that makes larger arcs recognizable. When writing the next part, I decided intuitively then to turn this into term of value and timbre or sound color. It is precisely in the repetition and its deviation that there is a great appeal, as it creates a kind of meta order that holds the whole thing together. Another important point is to use entire range of keyboard when I do this on a digital synthesizer, when I program with the keyboard, and I use it uniquely as possible. So when I compose, I go from the highest note to the lowest note over the 400 bars. I used to play Arnold Schönberg piano pieces when I was a music student, and this probably influenced me in this way. I have also adopted the 12-tone technique and its ban on repeating individual notes here. Although not as consistently, also not in a consequent way, consistently way. Depending on the timbre, I decided how it is transposed and when this row can be broken. It's not a fixed law or something. I change it when I don't like it. Generally speaking, I have also become a little more orderly in a person, although not in a civil sense. In addition to the purely electronic music or electroacoustic music, I then incorporated the so-called concrete sounds in the post-production. There are vocal, instrumental and everyday noises recorded with a microphone. I then intuitively added this to the electronic music to breathe a little more life into the whole thing. There are currently no rules for the composition. I decided according to change in taste about the subsequent layering of the concrete sounds of the electronic material. I'm not completely satisfied with it yet, but this rather regulated area of concentrated sounds is my punk part of the work. Maybe this will change in the future. I hope. Maybe the individual layers will be edited in this audio, but also in the video using the polyphone timelines. Yeah. Okay, for the last chapter, real last chapter, this is only the seminar which I want to do, and the text for description in the Vorlesungsverzeichnis. Okay, I call the seminar Ad libitum. Ad libitum, every musician knows you can do what you want to do. There is no law for you to play and how you to play. Maybe we can talk about this, but here is the text. The seminar will be about the future development of sound art. Sound art in the field of fine art and music or experimental music. All disciplines of the art school are welcome to work in a kind of ensemble from the school in order to present a concert, a performance in action or something similar as a group or class at the end of the semester. Each student brings her own work, and we try to incorporate this into the time schema as a group, because sound art has so far been measured in time, which also makes it, or we can call it, time art. We discuss the work for the respective students. Also, as a professor, I hold back because it concerns of your time and your youth and your studies. Your or her very personal psychologic shapes her artistic creation. Ad libitum is the first of all a free space that makes it possible to explore. Particularly in the field of art, one often notices an egocentricity that cannot take away my beloved art and music, but can take away my view of the art world. As a rule, there is only one job, there is only one scholarship, and sympathetically people with a strong egocentricity and self-promotion can sell themselves best. That's why it would be important to me that we as a grassroots democratic group research the area of sound art. The combination of contrasting artistic approaches can provide a path to new aspects of art. The individual beautiful tones of each student can add up to more than just editing together. That means I write about philosophical nothingness and its wonderful inadequacies. acquiring a certificate with active participation. Guests and second listeners welcome possibly guest lectures. Yeah. Thank you for your attention.
Wow. Beschäftigen, um zu verstehen, wie diese Gesetze ablaufen. Alles beginnt auf der atomaren Ebene, die sich mittels Elektronen, Protonen